bald. That's what they called her, right before they forced her down into the chair, locked her arms in place, and ran the clippers straight across her head. To them, she was nobody. An older recruit, medically sidelined, too quiet to register. The perfect mark. Someone they could shave, humiliate in front of the unit, and then emotionally bury like it never mattered. What they didn't realize was that the woman they were degrading outranked every man on that base, a leader who had once commanded SEAL teams across 3 continents. And before we get to what happened when she finally stood her ground, when the clippers hit the floor, and when a general reminded them exactly who she was, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Then hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this story isn't really about cruelty. It's about what happens when power gets corrected. She showed up just before sunrise, stepping off an unmarked transport with no insignia in sight and a small tightly secured duffel over her shoulder. There was no ceremony, no escort, no visible rank, just a clipboard under her arm and an entrance that faded into the background at Camp Ironclad, a joint force training compound buried deep in the Nevada desert. That alone was enough to make her invisible. The Navy SEALs training there didn't bother with names. If you weren't wearing a trident or talking like you chewed gravel for breakfast, you didn't exist. She wasn't the first civilian observer to pass through during Integration Week, and in their minds, she wouldn't be the last. To them, she was just another checked box, some Pentagon-mandated diversity initiative or interbranch liaison sent to observe and enhance cohesion. A few heads turned when she crossed the outer perimeter, but the interest faded fast. She didn't stand out. Mid-40s, short brown hair tucked under a standard-issue cap, fit but not imposing. No nameplate, no title, no authority on display, no salutes. Logistics or liaison, one voice muttered as she passed 2 SEALs lounging near the South Barracks. Clipboard civilian, the other smirked. Probably here to watch us sweat. Bet she's got a degree in conflict resolution or some nonsense. She heard every word, of course, but her face never changed. She gave a polite nod and kept moving, eyes lowered, pace steady. Inside the ops tent, an Army sergeant handed her a visitor badge, skimmed his clipboard without looking up, and waved vaguely toward the Eastern Observation Post. Shadow Alpha Team's rotation. Don't interfere. Don't talk during drills. Don't get in the way. Understood, she said simply. He never asked her name. Alpha Team didn't either. When the morning briefing began, she sat quietly against the back wall, pen ready, head slightly bowed, as if she'd already accepted her own irrelevance. Her posture was flawless, relaxed but disciplined, alert without signaling threat. Her eyes tracked every face in the tent, though no one noticed. They thought they were running the show. What they didn't know was that Evelyn Eve Carter had already memorized every name on the roster and had been studying Alpha Team long before she ever set foot on Camp Ironclad. She wasn't there to train them, and she wasn't there to advise. She was there to evaluate. Silently, thoroughly, and if necessary, to act. Around them, the compound looked like a live-action war game. Sun-bleached plywood, steel containers turned into command rooms, improvised obstacle courses, and canvas tents snapping in the dry desert wind. Inside the compound, the pecking order was obvious even without nameplates. The Navy SEALs set the tempo and controlled the mood. Army instructors kept the machinery running, but when it came to pace, discipline, or punishment, they deferred, sometimes openly, to the SEALs. Civilian contractors stayed on the fringes, mostly techs and medical observers, careful to stay quiet unless directly addressed. No one wanted to disturb the unspoken hierarchy. This was a place where reputation outweighed protocol, where informal authority mattered more than rank on paper, and where cruelty could be waved off as intensity. She saw it unfolding in real time. By her second day shadowing Alpha Team, she had already identified the name that carried real gravity: Chief Mason Holt. Decorated, dangerous, magnetic, and completely unchecked, Holt had spent more than 15 years in the teams. He wore a silver star, stacked deployments under joint command, and carried himself with a physical presence that filled the space before he spoke. His confidence spread easily, cocky without apology, efficient without compassion. Recruits and junior instructors either worshipped him or feared him, with nothing in between. He prided himself on reading people, breaking them down quickly. Everyone except her. To Holt, the quiet, middle-aged woman tucked in the corner with a clipboard and no insignia was just another Pentagon paper pusher, a civilian analyst who'd disappear in a week with a few buzzwords and a report no one would bother to read. "Careful, fellas," he joked during a chalk brief, flicking a glance toward her without looking directly. "She's probably tracking every time we forget our pronouns." Laughter rolled through the tent, even drawing a chuckle from the Army captain near the back wall. She didn't react, didn't look up, just turned a page. "Relax, Chief," a junior SEAL grinned. "She's probably here to count how many kettlebells we lift wrong." Holt smirked. "Or tally how many civilians we traumatize just by breathing." It wasn't outright malicious, but it was dismissive by design, and for now, that worked in her favor. Let them joke, let them underestimate. They didn't need to see what she was observing. Not yet. The culture was simple. Prove yourself or stay invisible, and by their standards she'd already failed both. It began with a casual jab during gear check. Holt paced past the line, barking his usual mix of insults and sarcasm. "Pack's too light, you're weak, too heavy, you're dumb. Boots aren't laced right, get ready to run." When he reached her ruck, he stopped just long enough to draw attention. "What's this?" he said loudly, tapping her hydration pack. "That your emotional support water bottle, ma'am?" A few snickers followed. She stayed silent. "Got quinoa bars in there too?" he added. "Maybe a journal to work through the trauma." She finally looked up, calm and steady. "It's standard issue, checked this morning." It was the first time she'd addressed him directly. The firmness in her voice, not defensive, just factual, hit a nerve. "I didn't ask if it was standard," he snapped. "I asked why you're in my AO if you can't carry real weight." That was the moment things shifted, quiet but precise. From then on, Holt made it personal. During drills, ma'am came out laced with contempt. In briefings, he tossed technical questions her way just to put her on the spot. When a comms relay failed during a simulated op, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe next time we leave the paperwork patrol back at HQ." She never reacted, just kept writing. Each comment loosened the room, made laughter easier, made her isolation feel normal. None of it crossed a clear reporting line, nothing overt enough to flag, but every remark shaved away at her standing, and, more importantly, drew a sharper line between her and them. What irritated Chief Mason Holt more than anything was her refusal to react. She didn't flinch, didn't ask for explanations, didn't complain up the chain. She simply stood there, calm, steady, fully present, like a stone that refused to shift no matter how hard he kicked it. So he kept kicking. During a land nav exercise, he conveniently forgot to assign her a partner. During PT, he called out her lap times loud enough to turn effort into embarrassment, and when a junior SEAL reached to help adjust her pack straps before a ruck, Holt snapped, "She doesn't need help. She needs a ticket back to Norfolk." By sundown, she was no longer just an irritation. She had become a threat to his control, That night, beneath the harsh floodlights behind the barracks, she stood with her hands clasped behind her back, staring toward the dark horizon. A contractor passed by, slowed, and asked quietly, "You all right?" She nodded once. "Just watching the stars." He moved on. She didn't say the rest out loud. She wasn't watching the stars. She was tracking behavior, measuring patterns, waiting for the moment when petty crossed into punishable. The next morning, her name appeared again at the bottom of the duty roster. Third day in a row assigned to low-priority labor. This time, it was reorganizing field medical kits inside a steel supply trailer that turned into an oven, the temperature climbing past 110 degrees by mid-afternoon. Officially, the task came from logistics. Unofficially, everyone knew Holt's hand was in it. He called it utilization, said everyone needed to contribute, but while others rotated through drills, classrooms, and op prep, she stayed sidelined with repetitive work. Never part of the team, always visible. During movement drills, she was handed extra ammo cans to shuttle between stations. "Think of it as cardio clipboard," Holt muttered as he passed. No one laughed this time, but no one pushed back either. That evening, he escalated again. Inside the simulation tent, half the squad stood geared up, running tactical entry reviews. She remained off to the side, observing as usual, until Holt pointed at her. "You, front and center." She stepped forward without hesitation. "Two-man breach and clear. You're up with Vega." Corporal Luis Vega hesitated. "Chief, she's not cleared." "She breathing?" Holt cut in. "Unless that clipboard weighs more than her spine, I want her in the stack." There were rules against it. Observers weren't supposed to run kinetic drills. Liability alone should have shut it down. But Holt wasn't asking. He was daring her to refuse. She didn't. She took her place in line. The drill ran clean. Her movements were precise, controlled, efficient. She cleared her sector smoothly. No wasted motion. Not flashy, but fast, solid, correct. Vega recalibrated halfway through, a flicker of respect crossing his face before Holt crushed it. "Not bad, Grandma," Holt said loudly. "Next time, try not to look like you're dusting for cobwebs." It was a cheap shot. He'd seen what everyone else had seen and refused to acknowledge it. After that, the gendered remarks picked up. "Ma'am" turned into "princess." "Observer" became "diversity." She caught dried-up civilian more than once. She logged every word, phrases, witnesses, protocol violations. Vega offered one afternoon to swap duties with her. She declined. Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, the only other woman attached to the squad, tried to raise concerns with an instructor. Nothing changed. The dynamic had hardened. Holt wasn't just flexing authority anymore. He was training the group to accept his version of reality. That she didn't belong, that she was weak, that she was dead weight. And if someone like her could be publicly diminished, it sent a clear reminder to everyone else of what happened when you didn't fall in line. She stayed quiet, but inside she was assessing him now, not just his authority, but his habits, his pressure points, how far his leash actually stretched. He thought she was the experiment. He never understood that she was the control. It happened at 1540 on day 5. A heat advisory had gone out hours earlier, but Chief Mason Holt pushed the schedule anyway. Hell Week didn't pause for weather. Half the operators were drilling near the vehicle range while she'd been assigned to coil and log comms cables beside the refueling depot. She had just set a line down near the trailer when his voice cut through the air behind her. "Stop!" She turned without urgency. He approached slowly, circling her with an exaggerated look of inspection. "Turn around," he said. "Yeah, that's what I thought." She stayed still. "Hair's out of regs. Can't have loose strands compromising seal integrity if we go live." Her hair was tight, A regulation bun secured under mesh, no flyaways, exactly as it had been every day. She answered him plainly. Grooming standard is within Navy regulations, sir. That made him hesitate. Not because she was wrong, but because she said it with certainty. You correcting me now, clipboard? No, sir, I'm stating a fact. There was no attitude in her voice, no challenge, just the same measured calm that had bothered him from the start. He stepped closer. You know what I think? She said nothing. I think you've been walking around this base like you're better than everyone here. Watching, judging, never sweating, never earning it. She remained silent. I think you need a real correction. Something you'll remember. She met his eyes, and for the first time, a hint of challenge surfaced beneath her stillness. This isn't your call, Chief. His smile shifted, turning sharp and predatory. He barked over his shoulder. Vega, Hale, grab her arms. The two men froze, eyes wide, unmoving. Now. Vega stepped forward reluctantly. Chief, we can't. That's an order. They complied, not with force but with fear, gripping her arms just enough to show obedience. She didn't resist. She didn't blink. Holt reached into a canvas duffel near the wall and pulled out the clippers. Military issue. Battery pack attached. They whined to life in a sharp burst. Hold her. A gust of wind swept dust across the compound. You like watching us suffer? He snarled. Let's see how you look when your shield's gone. He yanked off the mesh, fisted her hair, and pressed the clippers to her scalp. Say goodbye, Bald. The first lock fell softly, almost weightless. The buzz of the clippers cut louder than the wind. Another strip fell, then another, uneven and brutal, no care for symmetry. Someone gasped. A contractor turned away. Vega's hand shook where he held her arm. Lieutenant Sarah Quinn stood frozen several feet back, horror etched across her face. No one stepped in, and she didn't move. Jaw set, eyes steady, breathing controlled. She never said stop, never begged, never cried out. When Holt finally shut the clippers off, a ring of hair lay around her boots. He dropped the clippers at her feet and stepped back. There, he spat. Now you're in regulation. She slowly raised her head and looked at him, her face unreadable, calm as ever, though something had shifted behind her eyes. Then she spoke. One sentence, 5 words, no threat, no volume. You just ended your career. Somehow, it hit harder than any scream. The clippers' buzz lingered in the air long after they'd gone quiet, but the heavier sound was the silence that followed. Not relief, not resolution, but the deep, unmistakable silence of something irreversibly wrong, of lines crossed, of witnesses realizing what they'd just seen might never be explained away. She didn't say another word. She didn't lash out, didn't demand answers, didn't break down. Instead, she adjusted her footing, stepped forward, and calmly picked up the discarded mesh net from the dirt. Then, without a glance back, she crossed the compound, moving past the parked trucks, through teammates frozen in uneasy silence, and into the far corner of the logistics trailer. The door hissed closed behind her. Alone inside, she took exactly 30 seconds. Then, from a small nylon pouch tucked inside her clipboard case, she pulled out a hardened mobile unit. No touchscreen, no biometric scan, just a single-button encrypted SATCOM brick. She entered one code, waited, and spoke a short, controlled statement. Flag Protocol Delta 9 confirmed. Incident type, visual. Initiate freeze on Camp Ironclad, full trace. No names, no emotion, no qualifiers. The line went dead. Outside, the compound shifted under a new kind of tension. No one voiced it, but everyone felt it. Something had gone wrong, not just ethically but operationally. The air itself seemed heavier, pressing down on every chest. Corporal Luis Vega barely touched his dinner. Lieutenant Sarah Quinn sat apart, arms wrapped tight around herself. Petty Officer Mark Hale, the second man who had held her, went quiet altogether. Chief Mason Holt, meanwhile, moved through the evening as if nothing had happened. He joked, laughed, sipped instant coffee, even cracked remarks during the night brief. But his voice carried just a bit too far, his grin lingered too long, and when he dismissed the group, his eyes flicked toward the trailer. She hadn't come out since the afternoon, and for a brief moment he hesitated. Inside the trailer, under a flickering overhead light, she reviewed the base roster. Her gaze moved methodically across the names: Holt, Hale, Vega, Quinn, commanding staff, logistics supervisors. Everyone who had looked away, everyone who had followed orders. She didn't write a thing. She didn't need to. By morning, others would start asking the questions for her, and the man who believed he'd won would wake up inside a compound he no longer controlled. By 0700, Camp Ironclad no longer felt like a training ground. It felt like a pressure chamber. The first sign came with the vehicles. 3 matte black Suburbans rolled through the outer checkpoint just after first light, escorted by a plain Humvee with no markings. There was no announcement, no update on the comms board, no mention at morning brief. But everyone saw them, especially Holt. He stood near the armory, coffee in hand, pretending not to watch, though his jaw tightened when the third vehicle positioned itself with a clear line of sight to the training lanes. Then came the quiet adjustments. No one said who ordered them, but uniforms were suddenly squared away, clipboards double-checked, rules enforced that had been ignored for months. Overnight, the instructor's office had been reset, files reorganized, walls wiped clean, security cameras polished. Someone was coming, someone important. Holt's tone changed. The jokes stopped. The crude remarks disappeared. During a morning briefing on medevac procedures, he recited Navy protocol word for word, something no one had ever heard him do. He never mentioned her, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. She stood in formation that morning with a shaved head, no cover, no comment, no complaint. Vega offered her a spare cap. She declined. She stood motionless, expression unreadable, and somehow that made it worse. It wasn't just that she was there, it was how she carried it. No shame, no fear, just stillness. It unsettled the group more than Holt's aggression ever had. Quinn found herself glancing at her every few minutes. Hale barely spoke. Even Senior Chief Nolan Reed, usually Holt's echo, stayed uncharacteristically quiet. No one dared bring up what had happened the day before, but no one had forgotten it either. The compound felt like it was holding its breath. Mid-morning, a visiting officer arrived to observe unit cohesion. No introduction, just a clipboard and a checklist. He didn't smile, didn't linger, simply marked names, noted behavior, and left. By noon, 2 more sedans arrived, this time carrying Navy base registration plates, and the pressure only continued to build. By 1400, every comms line inside the admin tent had been locked down to encrypted traffic only. Civilian contractors were instructed to stand by and limit all movement. By 1600, Chief Mason Holt, once the loudest voice on the field, barely spoke above a murmur. He didn't know when it would hit or how it would land, but he could feel the pressure tightening. Somewhere deep down, he had to know that whatever machinery had started grinding behind Camp Ironclad began the instant he picked up those clippers. They arrived just after 1700. No helicopters, no sirens, just 4 black transport vehicles rolling down the access road like any routine visit. Except nothing about them was routine. The lead Humvee carried the insignia of Naval Special Warfare Command. a symbol so rarely seen at Camp Ironclad that when the gate guard radioed it in, the duty officer asked for confirmation twice. Inside the compound, silence spread faster than bootsteps. Holt said nothing. Neither did the recruits who froze mid-formation as the gates swung open. Two men in dark green utilities exited first, logistics officers, walking straight past the admin post toward the temporary CO's quarters without knocking. Behind them came a woman older than the rest, mid-40s, no unit patch, no name tape, just a black service blouse with a flat collar and a single silver star resting at her collarbone. A rank most there had never seen in person. Rear Admiral. The kind who didn't raise her voice. The kind who made senior instructors straighten instinctively, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes forward. She passed without acknowledgement, but Holt saw her. He stood in the outer quad, caught between the barracks and the mess, shoulders shifting as if he might turn away, then realizing it was already too late. She'd seen him. And more importantly, she'd seen her, standing still in PT gear by the water trough, towel over one shoulder, shaved scalp exposed, face unreadable. She didn't flinch when the Admiral stopped. Didn't speak as the woman took her in. The rest of the compound scattered in seconds. Instructors slipped into the admin building. Recruits suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Even Corporal Luis Vega, who had stayed close all week, stepped back. She didn't move. She stood where she was until the Admiral finally spoke. Not to her, but to the base. All personnel involved in yesterday's breach will assemble. Now. That was it. No explanation, no citation. Just an order that landed like a steel weight. Within minutes, everyone knew this wasn't a routine inquiry. It wasn't internal housekeeping. It was Naval Special Warfare Command, and that changed everything. Holt was called first. They didn't restrain him, didn't escort him to holding, just walked him into a sealed tent and zipped it shut behind him. No one knew what was said inside, but when he emerged, his face had gone pale. By 1800, 2 more instructors were summoned. By 1830, the base PA issued a recall for all instructors and command-level staff. By 1900, word filtered through the senior recruits. Something was happening up top. They didn't know the details, didn't know the backstory, didn't know what was coming. But she did. Because when the Admiral returned to the quad, she turned to the woman with the shaved head, gave a single nod, and said quietly, "General, walk with me." They moved side by side in silence, not out of formality, but something heavier. The kind of quiet that wasn't meant to be filled. Their boots crunched along the gravel at the edge of the quad, past the weight shed, past the obstacle pits, toward the outer perimeter most recruits never approached without orders. Only when the noise of the compound faded and the wind through the fencing took over did the Admiral speak. "I told them," she said, "told them you wouldn't flinch." The woman beside her, bare scalp drying in the late sun, didn't smile, just nodded. "You shouldn't be here," the Admiral continued, and it wasn't a reprimand, it was regret. "You cleared every echelon a decade ago, quietly, cleanly. There's no reason your name should ever be whispered here, let alone shouted." The General finally replied, her voice steady, "That's why I came back." The Admiral glanced over, not surprised, but not comforted either. "You could have sent a message." "I did." A pause. No one answered. They'd already started shaving me. The Admiral stopped walking, turned fully toward her, eyes sharp, expression flat, voice low. "Who gave that order?" the Admiral asked. The woman didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Admiral already knew, had known since the moment she arrived, but hadn't allowed herself to fully accept it until now. "You're a brigadier general in naval special warfare," the Admiral said quietly. The first woman to hold that post without a public announcement or ceremony. That alone should have guaranteed you immunity here. I didn't want immunity, General Evelyn Eve Carter replied. I wanted to see whether they'd treat someone they didn't recognize the same way they treat each other. She exhaled once. Now I know. They stood there again in silence, but it felt heavier this time, like pressure building between fault lines. Tomorrow, the Admiral said, Nestle Field Command will issue a bulletin. 3 instructors removed. 1 internal tribunal. This compound won't survive a second violation. I don't need punishment, Eve said softly. You need clarity, the Admiral answered. And so does every woman who walks through those gates after you. A pause. The Admiral stepped closer. Do you want me to pull you out? This time, Eve allowed herself a faint smile. No, ma'am, even after what they did, especially because of it. The Admiral studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and turned back toward the compound. Eve stayed where she was. As the sun dropped behind the ridge, stretching long shadows across the gravel, one of them remained in that stillness. The other walked on. The next morning, the base tried to act as if nothing had happened. No bulletin was read aloud. No changes at roll call. No statement from command. The 3 instructors were quietly reassigned. The showers ran quieter. The jokes thinned out. But the yard still filled with boots, chalk lines, shouted orders, posted rotations. Everything looked the same until she stepped into view. No cap, no cover, no bandage, just sunlight reflecting off her bare scalp like a declaration no one wanted to acknowledge, but no one could ignore. She crossed the quad in full uniform, insignia restored, eyes steady as she scanned the yard like she still belonged there, because she did. Only now they knew who she was. And that changed everything. The instructors didn't shout at her, didn't point, didn't smirk, didn't speak. They watched her take her place at the rear corner of the formation and didn't dare reposition her, didn't call her forward, didn't bark her rank. Just silence. Then, without a command, the front row of recruits straightened. The second row followed, then the third. No signal, no order, just a collective shift. The compound stood taller. They didn't salute her. Training yards don't work that way, but they saw her. And in that stillness, boots planted, lungs tight, jaws set in guilt or awe or both, a single female recruit stepped out of line. She didn't rush, didn't make a scene. She simply walked until she stood beside the woman whose punishment had turned into proof. She didn't say a word. She stood shoulder to shoulder. Moments later, another joined, then another. By the time the last row adjusted, it was unmistakable. A new formation had taken shape, not built on protocol or fear, but on recognition. And the instructors said nothing, because for the first time all week, they weren't the ones in control. Would you have spoken up if you'd seen what happened in that tent? Should recruits know who they're training beside, or does anonymity reveal something deeper? Drop a comment. We read them all. If this story hit you, tap like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss stories like this. And if someone you know needs a reminder of what really defines rank, share this video with them. More stories should be on your screen now. Go ahead and watch the next one. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Stay sharp.